Welcome to the Women of Soul Aligned Business Podcast. I'm Joe Che. I'm here with Sherry Bevan, and I'm excited because she is helping teams with leadership really get into how to be the high performance through communication, through team building, so that they can really perform at their highest level. Sherry, welcome. My first question for you is, all right, we got a team. They're in high stress. It's a bit chaotic. You're going to come in. What are you going to teach them? What are you going to do with them? Is it exercises? Is it like teaching them skills? What gets to the heart of it the fastest?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for having me, Joe. I think if they're in a very high stress situation, I probably want to get them to do, which actually is going to be really hard if they're in a high stress situation, but I want them to do something to take them outside of that situation for even for just 5 minutes. So I love to take teams outside and go for a brisk walk round the block or to do something physical because that changes the energy. And the other thing I love to do with teams who are in high stress situations is just to get them to take regular time out, even if that's just 2 minutes where they focus on something that's not work related. So asking each other some of those fun questions like, what's your favorite ice cream, or what's a city you've visited you'd love to go back to, but just taking them outside of their normal work for even just 2 minutes.
So basically breaking that cycle when a group is in high stress and struggling, try to break them out of that and bring them to something lighter. Is that the idea?
Yeah, exactly. And also for them to kind of reconnect with each other again as humans, human to human connection rather than that service desk analyst versus business analyst, but getting them to talk to each other as human beings and not as job titles.
Beautiful. Are you doing like team building exercises? I think the cliche one is like the trust falls so that you can start trusting each other.
Yeah, that is a cliche one, isn't it? And I do not do that one because I think very often I have been through that fall one myself, but I don't think there's a lot of careful work that has to be done to set that up so that people do feel safe to fall. And I think very often that gets skipped or you just don't have time to do it. Some of the exercises I do are a bit more down to earth and pragmatic, like I take people for a walk.
Some of the team building that you're doing to kind of get people to break through and to really bond as humans and not as that sort of like function in the corporate world or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. And that's what I love doing, is helping people work better together and starting to connect on a human to human basis. And really that means that they're more likely to share their ideas and to voice their concerns or ask questions. And it means at the end of the day, you're going to get a better performance overall because you've heard from everybody and everybody's had the opportunity to input and to contribute.
Yeah, I've really found in 30 years of community building that you really can't feel like you belong in a group until you feel like you've been seen and heard by the group, and then you feel a belonging when you get to see and hear someone else like in their authentic expression. So what are some ways that people can do that?
So I think one of the models that I like to look at is Timothy C. Clark's. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he talks about these 4 stages of psychological safety, and he talks about inclusion safety. So that's kind of when you feel welcomed and feel like you belong to the group. There's the learner safety where you feel it's okay to ask questions and start to learn. And then contributor safety is that's when you start to feel like it's okay to put forward your ideas and to put forward your feedback and to question things. And then the challenger safety is where you start to really be much more challenging in the way that you contribute, but not challenging as in negatively, but you're more likely to say, well, actually, I don't agree with that. I think it would be better to do it like this. And I think what's really important about creating that psychological safety is that feeling valued and feeling heard, and that your ideas don't get dismissed. It's very easy to say this is a safe space and you can say anything you like, but in order for people to feel that, they've got to know that if they do put forward an idea and the leader doesn't agree with that idea, that their ideas don't all get dismissed out of hand, but the leader at least thinks about it and says, yes, that's an interesting thought, but I don't know that that's going to work, or tell me more about it. So it is very much about that communication and that feeling heard and valued for what you say, even if the leader doesn't necessarily agree with everything you say.
Let's review those because I think that's interesting. I haven't heard this model. So there's 4 steps of safety within a group. Is that what I'm hearing, or was there
Yes,
five?
so he talks about these 4 stages of psychological safety. So he talks about inclusion safety. So in a new team, for example, that's somebody turning up and there's already a desk ready and prepared for them. You make them feel welcome and say, "Hi, come in, join us." Then there's learner safety, where you start to feel like that you belong now, and that it's okay to learn and to try things out and to experiment and make mistakes, because that's how you learn. And then there's a contributor safety, where you get to the point where you feel like you can contribute ideas and share your thoughts. And then that final stage is the challenger safety, where you could feel comfortable and safe to say, "I don't agree with what you're doing," or to give feedback that's perhaps a bit more critical. So it's about building on each of those 4 stages. It's Timothy C. Clark is the who designed that framework.
I like that. And I think it's really interesting because as I've done co created events and built community, that's the safety that we really are looking for, where you can feel safe to be seen and heard and to say, "What? I think I don't feel comfortable with that," and being able to speak up with yourself and not feel like you're going to get shut down or shamed. All right. So let's say our listeners are leaders of a team, of a business that they're building, and how can they create that highest level of psychological safety to allow their team members to actually challenge them? Number one. And number two, what are some of the communication techniques that you would suggest to reply when you are getting challenged? Because some people, they go into defense, right? And then they go into offense because they're getting challenged, they feel disrespected, when in reality that is another level of connection, being able to create a container where people can feel safe just to say, "I don't agree with that. I'd love to present another idea if you're open to it."
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because often we all want to create that safety and that safe space, but like you say, sometimes we can feel negatively criticized when we receive that alternative feedback. I think one of the key things to remember for any leaders is that you can have a team of people, but every time a new person joins or somebody leaves, not everybody in that team is going to feel at that same stage of safety. So if you've got a group of 6, for example, and somebody new joins, and so now you've got 7, that new person might still be feeling at that inclusion safety level, whereas the people who've been there a while might be feeling in a different place. So, you kind of have to bear that in mind, and simply saying this is a safe space, you can share whatever you like and contribute your ideas, is not enough. But as the leader, I think the important thing is to be authentic in your responses. So if somebody throws in an idea and you think, "Oh, but that was my best idea and I feel really insulted or disrespected," I think it's okay to say, "This is how I feel," but to do it in a way that is respectful. If I've organised an event, for example, and somebody else comes along and says, "Oh, well, I think we need to have more balloons," or "I think we need to provide more non-alcoholic options," I think it is about taking a moment, rather than leaping straight into offence, taking a moment and thinking, do they have a point here? Is this a valid argument? And to take a breather and not necessarily reply straight away. And if you are doing that reply in person, to just maybe count to 10 before you say something. If you're doing that reply and it's on email, is to don't send the email straight away. So take a few moments to think about it. Could that be valid feedback? Could that be an alternative way of seeing things? What experience does that person, or what perspective does that person bring that makes that a valid idea? I think the other thing is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because if you're trying to create a more innovative team, there are going to be moments where there is going to be discomfort, and you have to kind of go with the flow, because the more times you allow that to happen, the easier it gets over time.
What I'm hearing is not from the ego or the defense, but to really take, number one, take the time to settle before you respond when you're challenged. Number two, I'm hearing is look to see, is there anything that you can own or see that perspective that is you could say, actually there is something interesting in there that might be a better way. let me consider that. So I hear like a good leader is going to consider that. And so I'm curious now. So I've challenged you and I said, what, Sherry, I don't think we should have any balloons at all. They're plastic and they're bad for the environment and they take up a lot and they're going to end up on the lawn. They're going to end up in the pond and that can hurt the fish and the ducks. And so I've challenged you in that. And how do you respond to that?
Well, I think you have to respect that person's point of view and you have to say, yeah, do you know what? You're making good points. I can see how that balloon might end up in the pond and the fish swallow it, and or it ends up at the fish farm and the fish that you're farming eat balloons. Yeah, actually I can see how that's a good point. But I think rather than just rejecting an idea out of hand, the way you rejected that idea, you didn't just say, don't be stupid, that's a silly idea. You explained the reasoning behind why you want to reject the balloons, and I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, actually that makes sense. So I think that's a really important communication technique there, is explaining your thinking and your reasoning. And I think the other thing is to really properly listen to the idea, because maybe it's not about having balloons as such. Maybe it's that person is trying to think of a way to bring more fun into the event. So what's the reasoning behind that initial suggestion? Is it because they think it's going to look too boring and corporate and stuffy? Is it because they want to bring more fun into the event? Or is it that they think there needs to be something different, or maybe they've misunderstood the initial concept of what it is you're trying to achieve? So I think it is about seeking to understand what that person is bringing, whether you're offering the feedback or giving feedback.
Yeah, I think I've been working with, I'm on the neurodivergence, so communication, it has been very hard and connection's hard. And so I've actually studied a lot in communication because that's what I needed for myself. And I ended up creating, if you're familiar with nonviolent communication, I ended up doing another level on top of that and realizing in studies that there is ways to be communicating. One of the most important parts of that is curiosity.
Yes.
Right? And like coming back and always ending that when there's a difficult conversation or a challenging conversation is to end it with a curiosity question. Say, hey, thanks for that. I'm going to consider that because you're right. We don't want to hurt any wildlife. But I'm curious, is that because, are you concerned about the wildlife, or are you more concerned that, like, without the balloons, we're not going to have as much fun? So when you're curious, it tends to open people up so that they can have a more flowing conversation. And like you said, the balloons might not be the issue. They just want to make it fun or exciting or a spectacle, and they want it to be special. And this is important to them to be special. They might be emotionally invested in the outcome of the event or whatever it is. So I like that, coming back with a curiosity and coming back in a way that you're showing that you've listened and
Yes.
that you are going to consider it. You might not do it. You might say, no, we're going to have the balloons, right? Or we're not going to have the balloons. But the idea is that you're showing respect by truly listening.
Absolutely. I think that's the important part, is that being fully present and actively listening, and that curiosity, so that you understand where that suggestion or that idea is coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. What are is there any other techniques, Sherry, you can share with the audience? Something that you've learned that you're like, man, this is really useful. I wish everyone could learn this in team building, in leadership, whether you're on either side of it.
I think one thing that I've learned as a leader myself is giving people the appropriate amount of time. I think so often I've seen when miscommunication occurs, it's often when somebody's trying to tell you something that's really important to them. But if you're not listening properly because you're distracted, because you're checking your emails, or you're thinking, oh, I've got to get that report written, you're not actually fully taking in what they're saying. So I think giving that person the appropriate time and being like really fully present in the conversation. And it may well be that if they've got something important to share and you have got a really urgent deadline, an email to send, a report to finish, maybe it's better off to say, look, I can see that this is really important for you. I've got to get this finished. Can we come back together in half an hour? Or I've got some time in my diary tomorrow morning. Can we talk about it then? I think sometimes that miscommunication and misunderstanding occurs when you haven't been fully present in the conversation, and so you've missed vital details, or you've not asked the right question because you're thinking, oh, I've got to get this email sent out, instead of noticing the person's body language, or maybe you've not noticed that their tone of voice has changed, or the speed at which they're talking is either suddenly gone really fast or gone really slow, because that's a powerful indicator. So I think being fully present, making the time for that conversation, and noticing the whole of the conversation, like noticing the body language, the tone of voice, and noticing, is this person behaving the way they normally behave, or is this person doing something that's a bit different than normal? Like if they're normally somebody that's kind of calm and collected, and they're agitated and their body language is moving around, that probably indicates there's something else going on here.
It really is a difficult thing to be fully present in the conversation, because a lot of us, we get really excited to share what we are thinking when you're talking. So if you're speaking and I'm thinking about all the things I'm going to say, as soon as you're done, then that isn't being present. It's taking a second. I have one of my workshops is called the art of listening, and it talks exactly about this. Like, and the things that I've collected and share is like, one, count to one when someone's done speaking.
Yes.
2, listen and let them finish. Don't try to be thinking. That's what you're speaking about in the present. And then 3, there is a lot of body language stuff. I took these courses with the CIA on body language. Crazy stuff. We're like primates, and like people from different cultures are literally doing the same body language to communicate the same thing, regardless of their language or culture. So like there's some things that in our body language. The other one that's interesting is the left eye to left eye. If you're doing one-on-one digitally, it's not as relevant, but that creates the connection because our brain works contralaterally. So yeah, that's a very interesting one, which is to just be that present, listen fully, so that someone feels heard, and then the miscommunications don't. I mean, how many people do you feel like, as you're going into these groups, have these skills? Are you having to teach these, or is this like most people don't have them?
It really depends on the group or the team that I'm working with. It really depends on the individuals. I think very often some people have these skills naturally at a much deeper level than others, but they're skills that we can all learn. And like any skill, you can practice doing it more and practice getting good at it. So I think it really varies from group to group. You'll often have 2 or 3 people in the group who've got, good listening skills. And I think a good leader has learned to develop those skills over time. And I think the other thing that is important to take into account is that every individual is different, and just because you might be a very extroverted person or you might be a very introverted person, the likelihood is that others in your team are going to be different than you and prefer different types of communication. You're going to have people in your group who like the bullet points and the structure, and you're going to have other people in your group who want all of the story and the background, and you're going to have people in your group who will kind of think out loud and talk, and their thinking process is going on while they're talking, where there'll be other people who need to think about things first and who are much more reflective and who like to know in advance what the conversation is going to be about. So I think that's the other important part of that communication skill as a group or a team, is understanding what works for each individual person, because it is individual for each person.
Just being aware of everyone in the group, making them feel respected.
Absolutely.
And something I've learned a lot with leadership, I was teaching this a lot in Dubai for a program called I Am Leadership, is to lead from underneath, not from this place of like, you need to follow me and you do this, but recognizing what are your unique skills, what are the unique skills of each individual, and how do you put them in a position that they can use those unique skills without micromanagement, so that they can just own it and take it. And usually you'll get a much better result as a team if people are in their purpose, in their places, they're excited, they're filled up, they show up better, and they work a hell of a lot harder doing the things they actually care about than the shit that they don't like doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So to me, that's like leading from underneath. If people want to work with you, this is team building. Are you doing it online? Are you doing it in person in the UK, in London?
So most of the work that I do, a lot of it is in person, but a lot of things like coaching skills for leaders, I can do that online, but I can do that in person. I think there's a much better human to human connection when you do this type of work in person. So, for example, the team workshops that I run, I do those in person where we get people to kind of tune into their surroundings and get inspired by what's around them. But I do run quite a few workshops online for people, either, and it doesn't just have to be in, I mean, I'm based in London, but I'm going up to do a workshop in Scotland shortly, so it doesn't, I don't mind where I work. Um, so yeah, team workshops, team away days. I love to be able to get people outside at some point, or at least get them outside of their normal work environment, because I think that really opens up the mind to possibility and creativity, and just means that people kind of stop doing that corporate thinking. They stop thinking about everything the way they normally think about it, but it means they're a bit more open and a bit more receptive to new ideas.
Absolutely. You can find me at theconnectionmap.com. You can find Sherry on Instagram, Sherry Bevan Coach, and on her website, sherrybevan.co.uk. And feel free to hit us up if you resonate, if you need any help building your businesses and all that geeky masculine stuff is a pain in the rear. Come find me. And if you need that leadership and that team building, come find Sherry. So thank you everyone for listening and watching, and have a fantastic day. All right.